Hey everyone, today we're doing a deep dive into the first three Gospels of the New Testament. That's Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And by looking at the hard data, we are going to uncover a central message that might be completely different from what you expect. So let's get right into it.
So let's start with what seems like a really simple question. What are these books actually about? I mean, the answer seems obvious, right? Jesus, his teachings, the foundations of Christianity. But what if the author's own words, the words they chose to use over and over again, point to a different central theme?
If I asked you to just brainstorm the most important words in these Gospels, you'd probably come up with things like Christ, or love, or faith, and that makes perfect sense. But here's the thing. When we actually look at the word counts, the data tells a totally different and, frankly, a really surprising story.
Okay, just look at these raw numbers. The word Christ shows up 750 times across the entire New Testament, but in these three Gospels, only 40 times. That's just 5% of its total usage. Get this, agape, that profound Greek word for love, appears only twice. That's a measly 2%. And pistis, the word for faith, clocks in at just 10% of its total appearances. These core foundational Christian terms are statistically rare in the very books we think of as their source. So, what in the world is going on here?
To solve this little puzzle, we need the right kind of tool. And for this, we're going to use a method called biblical theology to really crack this code and see what these authors were actually trying to emphasize. So what is biblical theology? Well, to put it simply, it's a way of reading a part of the Bible to understand it on its own terms. Instead of us imposing our modern ideas onto the text, we look at the specific words, the structure, and the vocabulary the author actually chose to use. It helps us see what they thought was the most important thing. And to do that kind of analysis, we need a baseline, a starting point. And for our purposes, that baseline is this number right here, 0.33, or about 1/3.
So why 1/3? Well, it's pretty straightforward. The Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, make up roughly 1/3 of the entire New Testament. So, if a word is used there about 33% of the time, its usage is, average. But if it's way below 33%, like we just saw with Christ and love, it tells us the authors are intentionally de-emphasizing it. And if it's way above 33%, well, that's when we know we've hit the jackpot. We've found their central theme.
And this, right here, brings us to the big reveal. Because the data doesn't just show us what's missing, it points with overwhelming clarity to what is actually there.
I mean, this chart really says it all. Compared to that tiny 5% for Christ, just look at these two other terms. Son of Man, which was Jesus' favorite way to refer to himself, accounts for a staggering 80% of its total New Testament usage right here in these three books. And the word kingdom, it comes in at 74%. This isn't just a side topic. Statistically speaking, this is the main event.
So, the takeaway is unavoidable. The primary, data-driven message of Matthew, Mark, and Luke is all about one thing: the coming of the kingdom. Everything else in their stories revolves around this central, powerful idea.
Okay, but what exactly is this kingdom? It's not a word we use a lot today. Well, the source material breaks it down into three key parts. First, it's theocratic, which just means it's God's rule, not some human government. Second, and this is crucial, it's dynamic. It's not a place, like the United Kingdom. It's an activity. It's the reign or the rule of God in action. And third, it's messianic. This reign of God happens through his chosen agent, the Messiah, who these Gospels constantly refer to as the Son of Man.
Right, but solving one mystery just leads us to an even bigger one. If the Gospels are all about announcing that God's reign has arrived, then why does the world still look so, broken? Why is there still so much suffering and injustice and pain? This is the central tension of the entire story they're telling.
The answer, it turns out, is found in a powerful paradox. The kingdom is described as both already here and not yet complete. So first, let's look at all the ways the kingdom is presented as a current, present reality.
The Gospels give us a ton of evidence that the kingdom has already broken into our world. You see it when Satan is defeated in Jesus' temptation. You see it in the miracles, which are framed as these little glimpses of creation being restored and healed. The good news of God's reign is being announced out loud. And Jesus even says that his followers, in a very real sense, already possess this kingdom. The king is here, and his reign has officially begun.
But of course, that is not the whole story. Now we have to look at the other side of this tension, all the ways the kingdom is not yet fully here.
The narrative is also very clear that this present kingdom is just the beginning. The time of the evil one is still continuing. Those miracles, they're described as just signs, pointers to a future reality, not the final fulfillment itself. The final judgment is delayed. And maybe most importantly, the kingdom's advance isn't pictured as some big, sudden military conquest, but more like a slow, quiet, organic growth, like a tiny seed growing in a field.
So what does this all mean for someone reading this today? It means that we are living in the in-between. We're right in the middle of the already and the not yet. And according to the source material, this in-between period has a really profound purpose.
This quote from the source material just nails it perfectly. The time before the final, eschatological coming of the kingdom, which is just a fancy word for its ultimate end times fulfillment, is not for just sitting around and waiting. It's the time for a great task. This period we're in is defined by a specific mission that needs to be accomplished. And so, that's where we'll end. The Synoptic Gospels aren't just telling a story that happened 2,000 years ago, they're describing a reality that has begun but is not yet finished. And so they leave us with this really powerful question to think about. What does it mean for us to live inside this unfolding story, right here in the great in-between?